The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast long shadows across the asphalt. 11:47 p.m., the desert night wrapped around Flagstaff like a cold hand. Garrett Thorne stood beside his Harley-Davidson, a 1998 Road King that had seen more miles than most men see years. The chrome caught the orange glow of the sodium lamps. His hands rested on the handlebars, weathered and scarred the hands of a man who had built things and broken things in equal measure. 67 years old. The mirror didn't lie anymore, hadn't lied in a long time. Deep lines carved into sun-darkened skin. A scar ran from his right eye down to his jaw, a gift from a bottle fight in Tucson back in '92. Silver hair pulled back in a ponytail streaked with the last defiant threads of black. His leather vest hung open over a faded black shirt, the Hells Angels' death head patch barely visible in the dim light. He had come to the hospital because old habits die harder than old men. Tuesday nights, he visited the VA wing, sat with veterans who had nobody else, listened to their stories. Sometimes that was all they needed. Someone to listen, someone who understood that some things you see, you never unsee. Tonight he had stayed late. A Korean War vet named Murphy had been asking for him. Murphy died at 10:15 holding Garrett's hand, talking about a girl he had loved in soul 70 years ago. The last word Murphy said was her name. Garrett was tired, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. He reached for his ignition key when he heard the sound. Footsteps, running, desperate. A woman emerged from the emergency entrance, 71, maybe 72 years old. Gray hair wild around her face like she had been pulling at it. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong. She wore slippers, not shoes. Her eyes were red swollen from crying, but there was something else in them now. Determination. She ran across the parking lot, her breath coming in gasps, and Garrett saw the moment she spotted him, saw her trajectory change. She was running straight at him. He didn't move, didn't reach for the pistol at his hip. Something in her face told him this wasn't danger. This was desperation. She stopped 3 feet away, breathing hard, her hand clutching her chest. For a moment, she couldn't speak, just stared at him with those red eyes. Then she dropped to her knees on the cold asphalt. "Please," she said. The word came out broken. "Please, you have to help me." Garrett looked down at her. His face showed nothing. Years of practice had taught him how to keep the walls up, how to keep people out. "Ma'am, you need to get up off the ground." She shook her head, tears streaming now. "My husband is dying. They say he only has 4 hours, maybe less, but they won't let him come home. They won't let him leave." Garrett's jaw tightened. "That's between you and the doctors." "No," her voice cracked. "No, it's not. You don't understand. Dalton is dying, and he wants to die at home, in our bed, the bed we've shared for 50 years. But they say it's against protocol. They say it's a liability. They say. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "You're Garrett Thorne. I know who you are. Dalton told me about you. He said if I ever needed help, real help, I should find the man with the scar. The man who never breaks a promise." Garrett pulled his hand back slowly. "Your husband is mistaken about me, ma'am. My name is Evelyn Shepherd. My husband is Dalton Shepherd. He saved your life 37 years ago on Route 66. You were bleeding out next to your motorcycle and he stopped. He gave you his blood, a B negative, same as you. 1 in 100 people have that blood, but he did, and he saved you." The desert wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and creosote. Garrett stood perfectly still. The name had hit him like a fist. Dalton, 1987. Route 66, just outside Winslow. The Harley's front tire had blown at 80 miles per hour. The bike went down hard, and Garrett went with it, sliding across asphalt that tore through leather like paper. A piece of metal from the guardrail had punched through his side. He remembered the sky, remembered thinking it was a good sky to die under. Then a face appeared, a man in his 30s, grease under his fingernails, concern in his eyes. The man had a mobile CB radio in his truck, called for help, tied off Garrett's wound with his own shirt, stayed with him. At the hospital, when they said Garrett needed blood and they were out of AB negative, the man had rolled up his sleeve without hesitation. "I don't know you," the man had said, "but you're not dying on my watch." His name was Dalton Shepherd. Garrett pulled himself back to the present, looked down at Evelyn, still on her knees, still crying. "Get up," he said quietly. She stood unsteady, and he caught her elbow to keep her from falling. "Where is he?" Garrett asked. "3rd floor, room 314. They have him on machines. He's conscious. He knows what's happening. He asked me to find you." "Why?" "Because he's dying, Mr. Thorne. And dying men deserve to choose where they take their last breath." Garrett looked past her toward the hospital. A massive building of glass and steel and fluorescent light, a place where people went to be saved or to die, sometimes both. He had spent too much time in hospitals. After the Marines, after Carson died, after the bike accidents and the knife fights and all the ways a hard life tries to kill you. He hated hospitals, but he owed Dalton Shepherd his life. "Show me," he said. The elevator smelled like antiseptic and fear. Evelyn stood beside Garrett, her hands clasped together so tight her knuckles were white. She didn't speak. Neither did he. The elevator dinged. Third floor. The hallway stretched out before them, fluorescent lights humming overhead. A nurse's station sat in the center. Two nurses working behind computer screens. One looked up as they passed. Her eyes lingered on Garrett. The leather vest, the patches, the scar. She looked away. Room 314 was at the end of the hall. The door was half open. Garrett could hear the machines before he saw them. The steady beep of a heart monitor. The mechanical hiss of oxygen. Evelyn pushed the door open. The room was small, sterile. A single window looked out over the parking lot, curtains half drawn. The bed was positioned in the center, surrounded by machines that blinked and beeped and measured the remaining pieces of a man's life. In the bed lay Dalton Shepherd. He looked smaller than Garrett remembered, thinner. His skin had a gray pallor, the color of someone whose body was shutting down. An oxygen tube ran under his nose. IV lines snaked into both arms. A catheter bag hung from the side of the bed. But his eyes were open. And when they found Garrett, they held recognition. "Garrett." The voice was weak but steady. "You came." Garrett walked to the bedside, looked down at the man who had saved him. "Evelyn said you needed me." "I do." Dalton managed a smile. "I'm dying, son. Heart's giving out. Doctor said I've got maybe 4 hours. Could be less." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm 75. That's not a bad run." Dalton's hand moved slightly on the blanket, gesturing at the machines. "But I don't want to die here. I want to die at home, Mom." "Then tell them you're leaving." "I did. They said no. Medical liability, risk of death in transport. All the legal reasons why a man can't choose where to take his last breath." Evelyn moved to the other side of the bed, took her husband's hand. "I tried everything. I begged them, but they won't listen." Dalton looked up at Garrett. "You remember what I told you back in '87, Garrett remembered. After the ambulance had taken him away after the surgery, Dalton had visited him in the hospital. They had talked about life, about choices, about being a man. "You said a man's word is his bond," Garrett said quietly, "and that you never leave a brother behind." "That's right." Dalton's breathing was labored now. "You asked me why I stopped, why I helped you, and I told you why, that you couldn't drive past a man dying and live with yourself." "Exactly," and Dalton's eyes were wet now. "I can't live with myself dying in this room, Garrett. I made a promise to Ruth, my wife. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. She made me promise that when my time came, I'd die in our bed. The bed we bought at a yard sale in 1973. The bed where we made love and fought and made up and held each other through everything." His voice broke. "I promised her, Garrett, and I keep my promises." Garrett stood silent for a long moment. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled against the dark desert. He could hear voices in the hallway, a cart rolling past, life continuing while death waited in this small room. "What are you asking me to do?" Dalton looked at him directly. "I'm calling in the debt. You owed me your life. Now I'm asking for mine back. Not to live, just to die right. They'll arrest me for taking you out of here. I know. Could be kidnapping charges. Could be jail time. I know. And you might die before we get you home. I know that too." Dalton squeezed Evelyn's hand. "But I'd rather die free than live caged." Garrett looked at Evelyn. She was crying again, but she nodded. Permission, desperation, hope. He thought about Carson, his son, 30 years old when a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Highway 17. Carson had died in a hospital room not much different from this one. Garrett had been in Phoenix 3 hours away when he got the call. By the time he arrived, Carson was already gone. He never got to say goodbye, never got to hold his boy's hand one last time. He had failed Carson, but he wouldn't fail Dalton. "All right," Garrett said, "I'll get you home." Evelyn's face broke into something between a sob and a smile. "Thank you. Thank you." Dalton closed his eyes, relief washing over his features. "I knew you'd come." "I need to make some calls," Garrett said. "We can't just wheel you out. There's security, cameras, protocols." "Whatever you need to do it fast," Dalton whispered. "I can feel it, Garrett. Death's knocking, and he doesn't wait for anyone. Garrett stepped out of the hospital into the parking lot. The night air was cold, sharp in his lungs. He pulled out his phone, an old flip model he refused to upgrade, and dialed a number he knew by heart. 3 rings. Then a voice rough with sleep. "This better be good, Gravedigger." Booker Kane, 63 years old, former sergeant at arms of the Hells Angels Red Rock chapter. A man who had Garrett's back for 30 years through bar fights and DEA raids and everything in between. "I need you," Garrett said simply. "When and where?" "St. Mary's Hospital. Flagstaff, now." "What's the play?" "We're taking a dying man home." Silence on the other end. Then illegal. "Very. How much time we got?" 4 hours, maybe less. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Booker paused. "This the guy who saved you back in the day, Shepherd?" "Yeah." "Then I'm already on my way." The line went dead. Garrett looked up at the hospital, 3rd floor. He could just make out the window of room 314. The curtains were drawn now. His mind was already working through the problem. Security would be light at this hour, but not non-existent. There would be nurses at the station, maybe a security guard doing rounds, cameras in the hallways and the elevators in the parking lot. Taking Dalton out the front way would get them caught in minutes. He needed another option, and he needed someone on the inside. Garrett walked back through the emergency entrance. The waiting room was half full. A mother with a sick child, an old man holding a bloody towel to his hand, a teenager with a broken arm. They all looked up when he entered, then looked away. People always looked away. He found a quiet corner and stood there watching the flow of people. Nurses coming and going, doctors with tablets and stethoscopes, orderlies pushing gurneys and wheelchairs. Then he saw him, Dr. Sterling Whitmore, 61 years old, chief of emergency medicine. Garrett recognized him immediately. The last time they had met was 9 years ago, 2015. Whitmore's daughter, Addison, had gotten involved with the wrong crowd, a local gang that ran meth and girls out of a trailer park in Cottonwood. They had gotten Addison hooked, 16 years old and already disappearing into the kind of darkness that swallows people whole. Whitmore had come to Garrett, desperate. He had heard the stories, knew the reputation, knew that Garrett operated outside the law when the law wasn't enough. Garrett had taken care of it, found the gang, made it clear that Addison Whitmore was off limits. He didn't ask for money, didn't ask for anything except that Whitmore get his daughter into rehab and keep her there. Addison had gotten clean. Last Garrett heard, she was in medical school. Whitmore saw Garrett and froze. His face went through a series of emotions: surprise, recognition, something that might have been fear. He walked over slowly, his white coat crisp and clean. "Garrett Thorne," Whitmore said quietly. "It's been a long time." 9 years. "Addison is doing well. She's in her final year at Johns Hopkins. Top of her class." "Good." They stood there in the fluorescent glare of the emergency room, 2 men who lived in different worlds but shared one moment where those worlds had intersected. "Why are you here?" Whitmore asked. "I need to get someone out of this hospital." Whitmore's face hardened. "I can't help you with anything illegal." "The man's name is Dalton Shepherd, room 314. Heart failure. 4 hours to live, maybe less. He wants to die at home. Your staff won't let him leave. Because it's dangerous. If he dies in transport, the hospital is liable. So let me worry about that." "I can't." Whitmore shook his head. "I have protocols, regulations. I could lose my license." Garrett stepped closer, not threatening, just close enough that Whitmore had to look him in the eye. "You remember what you said to me 9 years ago when I brought Addison back to you?" Whitmore's jaw tightened. "I remember. You said you owed me everything, that if I ever needed anything, you'd find a way. I didn't think you'd ask me to break the law. I'm not asking you to break it. I'm asking you to look the other way while I do." Whitmore was silent. Around them, the hospital continued its rhythm. Beeping monitors, hushed conversations, the smell of disinfectant and suffering. "What do you need?" Whitmore finally asked. "Access to the East Wing, 20 minutes with no cameras, no security." "That's impossible. Addison is alive because of me. She's in medical school because she didn't die in some meth house when she was 16. Garrett's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm asking for 20 minutes. Whitmore looked at him for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something. "The East Wing maintenance entrance, 2nd floor. The cameras will go offline for security maintenance at 2:30 a.m. They'll be down for exactly 20 minutes. After that, I know nothing." He pulled a key card from his pocket and handed it to Garrett. This will get you through the maintenance doors. But after tonight, we're even. Understand? Garrett took the card. Understood. Garrett. Whitmore's voice stopped him as he turned to leave. Does he really only have 4 hours? That's what they say. Then get him home. Whitmore's voice was softer now. If I were dying, I'd want the same thing. Booker Kane arrived at 12:15 a.m. in a Ford F-250 pickup truck, black and anonymous. He found Garrett in the parking lot leaning against his Harley, going over the details in his mind. Booker was built like a concrete block. 5'9", 220, most of it muscle despite his age. His head was shaved clean, and a thick beard, more gray than black, now covered his jaw. He wore jeans and a denim jacket over a Henley shirt. No colors, nothing to draw attention. Tell me the play, Booker said without preamble. Dalton's in room 314, 3rd floor. We've got access through the East Wing maintenance entrance, 2nd floor at 2:30 a.m. 20-minute window. No cameras. How we moving him? Walking if he can, wheelchair if he can't. Condition dying, heart failure. Hooked up to oxygen IVs monitors. He's conscious but weak. Booker nodded, processing. Medical support. Evelyn says there's a nurse, friend of hers. Woman named Lorraine Fletcher, 58, works night shift in hospice care. Evelyn called her. She's willing to come with us, keep Dalton stable during transport. That's something. Booker pulled out a pack of cigarettes, offered one to Garrett. They both lit up the smoke rising into the cold desert night. What about after? Booker asked. They're gonna come looking. I know. Soon as we move him, they'll call the cops. Probably call it a kidnapping. How far to his house? Cottonwood, 43 miles, 45 minutes if we don't hit traffic, hour if we do. Booker thought about it. They'll have roadblocks up, AP out on the truck. Maybe, or maybe they'll think we went north toward the res. You want to play it straight. I want to get Dalton home. Garrett dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. After that, whatever happens, happens. You could go to jail for this. I know. For a long time. I know. Booker studied him. Why you doing this, Gravedigger? You don't owe this man enough to throw away your freedom. Garrett was quiet for a moment. He looked up at the hospital, at the lights in the windows where people were living and dying, saved and lost. When Carson died, he said slowly, I was 3 hours away. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already gone. I never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell him I loved him one last time. He turned to Booker. Evelyn is about to lose her husband, but she's going to be there. She's going to hold his hand. She's going to say goodbye. And Dalton is going to die in his own bed, in his own home, the way he wants. That's worth jail time, brother. Booker nodded slowly. All right then, let's get this man home. They spent the next hour preparing. Booker moved the truck to the east side of the hospital, backed it into a loading zone near the maintenance entrance. Garrett went back inside, found Evelyn on the 3rd floor. She had been sitting in Dalton's room holding his hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness. We're moving at 2:30, Garrett told her. Is Lorraine here? She's coming. She gets off shift at 2. We need basic medical supplies, oxygen tank, blood pressure cuff, anything to keep him stable for the drive. Lorraine will bring it. Garrett looked at Dalton and Bonman. The old man's breathing was shallow, labored. His skin had taken on a waxy quality. Death was close now, circling, waiting. How's he doing? He knows what's happening. Evelyn's voice was soft. He keeps talking about the house, about the bedroom. He wants to see the sunrise from our window one last time. What time does the sun come up? 6:45. Garrett checked his watch. 1:17 a.m., 5 hours and 28 minutes until sunrise. Dalton had maybe 4 hours to live. They were going to be cutting it close. At 2 a.m., a woman in scrubs appeared at the door, Lorraine Fletcher. She was shorter than Evelyn, with gray hair pulled back in a bun, and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much death to be surprised by it anymore. She carried a duffel bag. Portable oxygen, she said without introduction. Blood pressure monitor, basic IV supplies, morphine in case the pain gets bad. She looked at Garrett. You must be Thorne. I am. Evelyn says you're going to get Dalton out of here. That's the plan. Good. I've been a nurse for 37 years. You know what I've learned? Sometimes the best medicine is letting people die the way they want to. She set the bag down. I'm coming with you. You could lose your job. I'm retiring in 3 months anyway. She gave him a hard look. And I'd rather lose my job than lose my soul. Now, are we doing this or not? Garrett allowed himself a small smile. We're doing this. At 2:25 a.m., they gathered in Dalton's room. Evelyn, Lorraine, and Garrett. Booker waited downstairs with the truck. Dalton was awake. His eyes were clear focused. He knew this was it. "You ready?" Garrett asked. Dalton nodded. "I've been ready for 5 years. Since Ruth died, I'm just ready to be with her again." Lorraine began disconnecting him from the machines. The heart monitor, the IV drips, the oxygen. Each machine went silent, and the room became quieter, more intimate. She replaced the hospital oxygen with the portable tank, adjusted the flow. Dalton's breathing eased slightly. "Can you walk?" Garrett asked. "I'll crawl if I have to." Garrett moved to the bedside, slipped his arm under Dalton's shoulders. The old man weighed almost nothing, just skin and bone and will. Together they got him sitting up, then standing. Dalton swayed his legs weak, but he stayed upright. Evelyn moved to his other side, supporting him. "We're going to take this slow," Garrett said. "One step at a time." They moved toward the door. Lorraine went first, carrying the duffel bag and oxygen tank. Then Dalton supported between Garrett and Evelyn. Each step was an effort, each breath a battle. The hallway was empty, 2:28 a.m. The night shift was at its quietest. The nurses were in the break room or doing rounds on other floors. They reached the elevator. Garrett pressed the button. The wait felt like hours. The doors opened. Empty. They stepped inside. Garrett pressed the button for the second floor. The doors closed. Dalton's head sagged against Garrett's shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "Whatever happens now, thank you." "Save your breath, old man. We're not home yet." The elevator descended. The doors opened on the second floor. The hallway stretched before them, dim and silent. At the far end, Garrett could see the maintenance entrance. The red light on the camera above the door was dark. Whitmore had kept his word. They moved as quickly as Dalton could manage. Down the hallway, past empty rooms and supply closets. The only sound were their footsteps and Dalton's labored breathing. Garrett used the key card. The door clicked open. Beyond it was a narrow stairwell, concrete and metal, lit by a single bare bulb. They descended carefully, Dalton's feet barely able to manage the steps. Halfway down, he stumbled. Garrett caught him, held him upright. "Almost there," Evelyn whispered. "Almost home, darling." At the bottom of the stairs was another door. Garrett pushed it open. Cold night air rushed in. The loading zone. Booker's truck waited, engine running, tailgate down. Booker jumped out, helped them get Dalton into the back seat. Lorraine climbed in beside him, already checking his vitals. Evelyn got in on the other side, taking her husband's hand. Garrett and Booker stood for a moment, looking back at the hospital. "No alarms yet," Booker said. "They'll figure it out soon enough." "You riding with us or taking the Harley?" Garrett looked at his motorcycle sitting alone in the parking lot. Then he looked at the truck at Dalton, visible through the window, gray-faced and dying. "I'm riding with you," he said. They got in. Booker put the truck in gear. At 2:47 a.m., they pulled out of the hospital parking lot and onto the empty streets of Flagstaff. Behind them, the hospital lights grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Inside the truck, Dalton opened his eyes. "Are we going home?" "Yes, Dalton," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. "We're going home." And somewhere in the hospital, a nurse walked into room 314 and found it empty. Found the machine silent and dark. Found a note on the bed written in Evelyn's shaking hand. "He just wanted to die at home. Please understand." The nurse picked up the phone, and the hunt began. Route 89. A cut through the darkness like a scar across the desert floor. 2:53 a.m. The headlights of Booker's F250 swept across empty asphalt, illuminating sagebrush and Joshua trees that stood like silent witnesses to their flight. Garrett sat in the passenger seat, his hand resting on the door handle, eyes scanning the road ahead and the mirrors behind. Old habits. Always watching. Always ready. In the back seat, Dalton lay with his head against Evelyn's shoulder. The portable oxygen hissed softly. Lorraine kept 2 fingers on his wrist, counting heartbeats, her face unreadable in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "How is he?" Booker asked, his voice low. "Holding," Lorraine said, "but not for long. Heart rate's dropping, blood pressure's at 80/50, and falling." "How far to Cottonwood?" Evelyn asked. Her voice was steady, but Garrett could hear the fear underneath. 38 miles, Booker said. 40 minutes if the road stays clear. "He doesn't have 40 minutes. Lorraine didn't look up from her watch. "Maybe he has 2 hours. Maybe less." The truck hit a pothole, and Dalton groaned a sound of pain so raw it made Evelyn flinch. Booker eased off the gab, taking the curves more carefully. "The road gets rougher through the canyon," Garrett said. "Switchbacks all the way down to Sedona." "I'll take it slow." "We don't have time for slow. We also don't have time for him to die before we get there. Garrett said nothing. Booker was right. This was the balance. Speed versus survival. Getting home before Dalton died versus killing him trying to get there. Behind them, Flagstaff disappeared into the night. The city lights faded to nothing, swallowed by the vast darkness of the high desert. Out here, there was only the road and the stars and the endless black of the Arizona wilderness. Garrett's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text from a number he didn't recognize. They know. AP issued at 0252. Description of vehicle and occupants. Sheriff's Department notified. Roadblocks possible on 89A and I-17. Be careful. Whitmore. The doctor was still helping, even now. We've got company coming, Garrett said. He showed Booker the text. Booker's jaw tightened. How long you think we got? Not long. Maybe they're setting up roadblocks now. Maybe they're already on the road. We could take back roads, county routes, avoid the main highways. That adds an hour, maybe more. In the back seat, Dalton stirred. His eyes open, found Garrett's in the rearview mirror. Don't stop, he whispered. Whatever happens, don't stop. We're not stopping, Garrett said. Promise me. I promise. Dalton's eyes closed again. His breathing was shallow, rapid. Each breath sounded like it cost him everything. Evelyn was crying now, silent tears running down her face as she held her husband. 50 years of marriage. 50 years of mornings and nights. Arguments and reconciliations, joy and sorrow. All of it coming down to this. A race against death on a dark highway. There's a scenic overlook about 10 miles ahead, Garrett said. Cathedral Rock, you can see it from the pullout. Why does that matter? Booker asked. Garrett glanced back at Dalton. Because 37 years ago, Dalton told me that's where he proposed to his wife. Said it was the most beautiful place he'd ever seen. Evelyn looked up. You remember that? I remember everything Dalton told me. He said Ruth was sitting on a blanket watching the sunset, and he got down on one knee right there on the red rocks. Said she cried for 10 minutes before she said yes. 1972, Evelyn whispered. June 14th. I was 20 years old. He was 23. We didn't have a ring, didn't have anything but a beat-up pickup truck and $50 between us. But I said yes because I knew he was the one. Dalton's hand moved weakly, found hers, squeezed. I want to see it, he said, his voice barely audible. One more time. Booker looked at Garrett. The question was unspoken but clear. They didn't have time for stops. They barely had time to get to Cottonwood as it was. Every minute counted, but some things mattered more than time. Take the overlook, Garrett said. The pullout appeared on the right side of the highway, a small gravel lot carved into the mountainside. Booker slowed the truck and turned in, tires crunching on loose stone. 3:17 a.m. The sky above was a river of stars. The Milky Way stretched across the darkness like spilled paint. And rising from the desert floor, illuminated by moonlight, stood Cathedral Rock. Red sandstone spires reached toward the heavens, ancient and eternal. Even in darkness, the formation was magnificent. Sacred, the Yavapai people had considered this place holy for thousands of years. Looking at it now, Garrett understood why. Booker cut the engine. The sudden silence was profound. No traffic, no city sounds, just the whisper of wind through the canyon and the distant call of a coyote. Help me get him out, Garrett said. They opened the back door carefully. Lorraine disconnected the oxygen tank from its mount and handed it to Evelyn. Then Garrett and Booker lifted Dalton out of the truck as gently as they could. He weighed nothing, a body already halfway gone. They carried him to a flat rock at the edge of the overlook. Set him down carefully. Evelyn sat beside him, adjusting the oxygen tube under his nose. Lorraine stood close, watchful, ready. Dalton's eyes opened. For a moment, they were unfocused, distant. Then they found the rock formation, and something changed in his face. The pain lines softened. His breathing, though still labored, seemed to ease. He stared at Cathedral Rock the way a drowning man stares at shore. Ruth, he whispered, I brought you back to the place. Evelyn took his hand, pressed it to her cheek. I'm here, darling. I'm right here. No, Dalton's voice was weak but certain. Ruth is here. I can feel her. She's been waiting. Evelyn's tears fell on his hand. What does she say? She says it's okay. She says I can come home now. His eyes never left the rock formation. We used to come here every year, our anniversary. Sit right on this spot and watch the sun come up. 50 years we did that, 50 years. 51, Evelyn said. We have been married 51 years. Best 51 years any man ever had. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. The sound echoed off the canyon walls. Garrett stood back, giving them space. Booker lit a cigarette, offered one to Garrett. They smoked in silence, watching an old man say goodbye to memories. Lorraine checked her watch, then Dalton's pulse. She caught Garrett's eye and shook her head slightly. Not long now. We need to keep moving, Garrett said quietly. Dalton heard him. Not yet, please. Just a few more minutes. Garrett looked at his own watch, 3:26 a.m. They were 32 miles from Cottonwood. If they left now, they might make it. Might get Dalton home before he died. But if they stayed even for 5 more minutes... Garrett, Dalton's voice was stronger now, pulled from some reserve deep within him. You remember what you asked me back in the hospital. After I saved you, Garrett remembered. He had been lying in the recovery room, bandaged and broken, and Dalton had come to visit. They had talked for hours, about life, about death, about what it meant to be a man. I asked you what you were afraid of, Garrett said, and I told you I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving things unsaid, leaving places unvisited, leaving love ungiven. Dalton looked at him. I'm not afraid anymore, Garrett. I've said everything I need to say. I'm exactly where I need to be. And I've loved this woman every day for 51 years. But you wanted to die at home. I want to die in the place I love most, surrounded by the people I love most. Dalton gestured weakly at the rock formation at Evelyn, at the vast desert night. I'm already there. Evelyn made a sound, half sob, half laugh. Oh, Dalton. Evelyn. He turned his head to look at her. Do you remember what you said to me right here when I asked you to marry me? I said yes. Before that, I asked you if you were sure, if you really wanted to spend your life with a broke mechanic who didn't have anything to offer but hard work and honest love. You know what you said? She was crying openly now. I said I didn't need anything but you. And you were right. We didn't need anything else. We had each other. We had this place. We had 51 years of mornings and nights and everything in between. His breathing was becoming more difficult now. I'm ready, Evelyn. I'm ready to go. No. She shook her head. No, not yet. We have to get you home. To our bed. Like you promised, Ruth. I'm breaking that promise. Dalton's hand tightened on hers. Ruth would understand. She'd want me right here, where it all began. Lorraine knelt beside them, checked his pulse again. Her face was grave. His heart rate is dropping fast. I don't think he'll survive the rest of the drive. Evelyn looked at Garrett, desperation in her eyes. But we're so close. We can still make it. Garrett looked at Dalton, really looked at him. Saw a man at peace, a man who had made his choice. No, Garrett said quietly. We can't, and he doesn't want us to. The truth hung in the air between them. They had come all this way, broken laws, risked arrest, run from the police, all to get Dalton home to die in his own bed. But Dalton had chosen differently. Booker, Garrett said, get the blankets from the truck and the folding chairs. Booker understood immediately. He moved to the truck, pulled out the emergency supplies they kept in the back. 2 wool blankets, 2 canvas camp chairs. They set up the chairs facing Cathedral Rock. Helped Dalton into one, wrapped him in a blanket, despite the fact that he couldn't feel the cold anymore. Evelyn sat in the other chair, close enough to hold his hand. Lorraine adjusted the oxygen one last time. Then she stepped back, gave them privacy. Garrett, Booker, and Lorraine stood at the truck 20 feet away, close enough to help if needed, far enough to let a man and woman have their final moments. How long? Booker asked quietly. Minutes, Lorraine said, his body shutting down, heart, lungs, everything. It's remarkable he's held on this long. He had something to hold on for, Garrett said. They watched in silence as Evelyn and Dalton sat together in the darkness, hands clasped, looking at the place where their life together had begun. And then in the distance, they heard it. Sirens. The red and blue lights appeared on the highway below 3 miles away, but closing fast. 2 vehicles. Maybe 3. Roadblock didn't catch us, Booker said. They're coming straight up the highway. They'll be here in 5 minutes, Garrett said. He looked at Dalton and Evelyn still sitting together, oblivious to the approaching law. Maybe less. What do you want to do, Ticio? Garrett thought about it. They could try to run, load Dalton back in the truck and take the back roads. Might buy them another hour. Might get them to Cottonwood before the police close the net. But Dalton wouldn't survive another hour of rough roads and stress. And even if he did, he had made his choice. He wanted to be here. We stay, Garrett said. Lorraine looked at him. They'll arrest you. I know. You could go to prison. I know that too. Booker flicked his cigarette away. Then I'm staying with you. You don't have to do that. The hell I don't. Brothers don't leave a brothers behind. You taught me that. The sirens grew louder, closer. The lights painted the canyon walls in alternating red and blue like a pulse. Garrett walked over to Evelyn and Dalton, knelt beside them. Police are coming, he said quietly. About 3 minutes out. Evelyn's face crumpled. No, not yet. He needs more time. I know, but they're coming whether we want them to or not. Dalton's eyes opened. He looked at Garrett with perfect clarity. Thank you for getting me here, for giving me this. I didn't do anything. You gave me a choice, and in the end, that's all any man can ask for. The right to choose how his story ends. The first police vehicle crested the hill, a sheriff's SUV light bar flashing. It slowed as it approached the pullout, then turned in tires crunching on gravel. Behind it came a second vehicle, then a third. They formed a semicircle around the truck, blocking any escape. Doors opened. Officers stepped out, hands on their weapons, not drawn but ready. From the lead vehicle emerged a man in a tan uniform. Sheriff's star on his chest, late 50s, maybe 60, gray hair cut military short, face weathered by sun and time. He walked toward them, slowly taking in the scene. The truck, the old man wrapped in a blanket, clearly dying. The woman beside him crying. The two bikers and the nurse standing by, making no move to run. I'm Sheriff Clayton Bridger, he said. His voice was rough, authoritative, but not unkind. Coconino County, I'm going to need everyone to stay calm and keep their hands where I can see them. Garrett stood slowly, hands visible, open, non-threatening. Sheriff, Bridger's eyes locked on him. Garrett Thorne, also known as Gravedigger, former Sergeant-at-Arms, Hells Angels Red Rock chapter, currently wanted for kidnapping and interfering with medical treatment. That's about the shape of it. The hospital says you took Dalton Shepherd against medical advice, that he's critically ill and needs immediate care. The hospital's half right. Garrett gestured toward Dalton. He is critically ill. He's dying, but he doesn't need care. He needs peace. Bridger looked at Dalton, really looked at him, saw the gray skin, the labored breathing, the oxygen tank, the look of a man standing at death's door. Mr. Shepherd, Bridger said, addressing Dalton directly, did these men take you against your will? Dalton's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried in the desert silence. No, I asked them to bring me here. You understand you're dying. Yes. And you want to be here, not in a hospital. I want to die looking at the place where my life truly began, with my wife beside me. That's all I ever wanted. Bridger was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, his deputies waited uncertain. This wasn't a standard call. This wasn't a criminal fleeing justice. This was something else entirely. One of the deputies, a younger man in his 30s, stepped forward. Sheriff, the hospital reported this as a kidnapping. We need to... I know what was reported, Harris, Bridger said without turning around. Deputy Harris looked uncomfortable. My father died 3 years ago. Cancer. He was in the hospital, hooked up to machines. He wanted to come home, but the doctor said no. Said it was too dangerous. Too much liability. Harris's voice cracked slightly. He died in that hospital room. Alone. I was stuck in traffic 30 minutes away. By the time I got there, he was already gone. I never got to say goodbye. The deputy looked at Dalton and Evelyn. If my father had someone like them, someone willing to break the law to give him a choice, I think he would have taken it, and I think he would have died a happier man. Bridger turned to look at his deputy. Something passed between them. Understanding, shared grief, the knowledge that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. How long does he have? Bridger asked Lorraine. She checked Dalton's pulse again. Minutes, maybe 10, maybe less. Bridger looked at his watch, 3:41 a.m. He looked at the sky. Still dark, but the faintest hint of gray was beginning to show in the east. Dawn was coming. He made a decision. All right, Bridger said. Here is what's going to happen. My deputies and I are going to return to our vehicles. We're going to do paperwork. We're going to take our time. Maybe 15, 20 minutes worth of paperwork. Garrett understood immediately. So did Booker. After that paperwork is done, Bridger continued, we're going to check on the situation here. And if Mr. Shepherd has passed by, then we'll handle it as a natural death. No kidnapping, no charges, just an old man who died on his own terms. Sheriff, one of the other deputies started. But if he's still alive, Bridger spoke over him, we're going to have to transport him back to the hospital. And everyone involved in taking him will be placed under arrest. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Garrett said. Bridger looked at Dalton one more time. I hope you find your peace, Mr. Shepherd. I already have, Sheriff. Thank you. Bridger nodded once, then he turned and walked back to his vehicle. His deputies followed, though Harris looked back once his eyes wet. The doors closed. The officers sat in their vehicles, lights still flashing, but making no move to intervene. They had 15 minutes, maybe 20, if Bridger was feeling generous. And Dalton had maybe 10 to live. Evelyn looked at Garrett, her face a mixture of gratitude and despair. What do we do now? We wait, Garrett said. We wait and we stay with him until the end. Garrett pulled a second chair from the truck, set it on Dalton's other side. Lorraine sat down, kept her fingers on his wrist, monitoring the heartbeat that was growing fainter with each passing moment. Booker stood behind them, silent guardian, keeping watch. The stars above were beginning to fade as the first hint of dawn approached. The sky to the east was no longer black, but deep blue, the color of the ocean at midnight. Dalton's breathing had changed. No longer the labored gasp of someone fighting to live, but something softer, slower, the breathing of someone letting go. Evelyn, he whispered. I'm here, darling. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't grieve too long. You've got good years left. Live them. Find joy, boy. Find purpose. His hand squeezed hers weakly. And when your time comes, when death knocks on your door, don't be afraid. Because I'll be waiting. Me and Ruth. We'll all be together again. I don't want to be without you. You won't be. I'll be in every sunset you watch. Every morning you wake up. Every memory we made together. He paused, gathering strength. Love doesn't end, Evelyn. Not real love. It just changes form. She pressed her forehead against his. I love you, Dalton Shepherd. I have loved you every day for 51 years, and I will love you every day until I see you again. I know, and that's enough. That's more than enough. The sky was lighter now, the stars disappearing one by one. Cathedral Rock was becoming visible, its red walls catching the first rays of sun that hadn't yet reached the valley floor. Dalton turned his head slightly, looking at the formation. It's beautiful, just like I remember. Just like our first morning here, Evelyn said, when we came back after our wedding. Slept in the truck and woke up to watch the sunrise. Best morning of my life. Mine too. Lorraine's fingers pressed against Dalton's wrist. The pulse was threadbare now, barely there. Mr. Shepherd, she said gently, can you hear me? Yes. Is there any pain? No, no pain, just tired, so tired. Then rest. It's okay to rest now. Dalton's eyes moved to Garrett. You kept your promise. You got me here. I did. Thank you for everything, for letting me eat like a ma, with dignity, with choice. Garrett's throat was tight. It was the least I could do. No, it was the most anyone could do. Dalton's eyes were starting to unfocus. Tell me something, Garrett. When your time comes, how do you want to do? Garrett thought about it. I don't know, never thought about it much. Think about it now. I guess I'd want to die doing something that matters. Helping someone, protecting someone, not just fading away in some room somewhere. Then that's how you'll go. Dalton's voice was fading. Men like us, we don't fade. We burn. And when we're done burning, we leave light behind. The sun broke over the horizon. Golden light flooded the canyon, painting Cathedral Rock in shades of amber and crimson. The redstone seemed to glow from within, ancient and eternal. Evelyn gasped. Look, Dalton, look at the sunrise. But Dalton's eyes had already closed. His breathing slowed. One breath, two, three, then stillness. Lorraine kept her fingers on his wrist, counting the final heartbeats. 30 seconds, 45, a minute. She looked up at Evelyn, her eyes kind but certain. He's gone. Evelyn didn't cry. Not yet. She just sat there, holding her husband's hand, looking at his face, peaceful now, in a way it hadn't been for months. He made it, she whispered. He saw the sunrise. Garrett stood, looked at the sky. The sun was fully up now, the desert morning, bright and clear. In the distance, a red-tailed hawk circled, calling. He walked over to the sheriff's vehicle, knocked on the window. Bridger rolled it down. Is it over? It's over. He died at 3:58 a.m. Natural causes. Heart failure. He went peacefully. Bridger nodded slowly. I'll need to call it in. Get the medical examiner out here. But there won't be any criminal investigation. Just a man who died where he wanted to die. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me. I didn't do anything except my job. The law says a man has the right to refuse medical treatment. Says he has the right to die with dignity. I just enforce the law. That's not how the hospital will see it. I don't care how the hospital sees it. Bridger looked past Garrett at Evelyn, still sitting beside her husband's body. That woman just lost her husband. The least we can do is let her grieve in peace. He picked up his radio, called it in. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Bridger. We have a code 4 at the Cathedral Rock Overlook. Natural death, elderly male, suspected heart failure. Request medical examiner and transport. No criminal activity. Over. The radio crackled. Copy that, Sheriff. ME is en route. ETA 20 minutes. Bridger looked at Garrett. You've got 20 minutes before official personnel arrive. Use them. Garrett understood. He returned to the overlook where Booker and Lorraine stood respectfully back, giving Evelyn space. Medical examiner is coming, Garrett said quietly. We should say our goodbyes. Booker stepped forward, stood looking down at Dalton's body. I didn't know him, but any man who'd stop to save a stranger, give his own blood to keep him alive. That's the kind of man the world needs more of. He placed his hand on Dalton's shoulder for a moment, then stepped back. Lorraine checked the body professionally one more time, confirming what they all knew. Then she too paid her respects. Rest well, Mr. Shepherd. You earned it. Garrett was the last. He looked at the man who had saved his life 37 years ago. The man who had taught him that honor meant keeping promises. That brotherhood meant showing up when it mattered. I never got to repay you, Garrett said quietly. Not really. You gave me my life back in '87. All I could give you was a choice about how to end yours. Doesn't seem like enough. Evelyn looked up at him. It was everything. Don't you understand? You gave him the most precious gift anyone can give. Freedom, choice, dignity. You let him die as himself, not as a patient in a bed with tubes and machines. She faced him directly. The hospital would have kept him alive for maybe a few more hours, but they would have stolen his death, made it about their protocols and their liability instead of about him, about us, about the life we built together. She took Garrett's hand. You gave him back his death, made it his own again. That's worth more than all the extra hours in the world. Garrett didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, warming the desert air. The police lights had been turned off now. The canyon was quiet except for the wind and the occasional call of a bird. At 4:18 a.m., the medical examiner's van arrived. A tired-looking woman in her 50s got out carrying a clipboard and a camera. She took photos, made notes, asked questions in a professional, detached voice. Time of death, 3:58 a.m., Lorraine said. I'm a nurse. I monitored his vitals until the end. 'Cause heart failure. He had end-stage cardiac disease. Was given 4 hours to live by his doctors. Was he in hospice care? No, he chose to leave the hospital. The medical examiner looked at Sheriff Bridger. He gave her a small nod. She understood. Don't ask questions. Don't complicate this. All right, she said. We'll transport the body to the morgue for standard examination. But this appears to be a natural death. No signs of trauma or foul play. She and her assistant loaded Dalton's body onto a gurney with professional efficiency, covered him with a white sheet, wheeled him toward the van. Evelyn watched them take her husband away. This time the tears came, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. Garrett stepped forward, unsure, awkward. He had spent a lifetime around violence and death, but grief still made him uncomfortable. He didn't know the right words, didn't know how to comfort. But Evelyn reached for him, and he let her lean against his chest while she cried, stood there solid and still while she grieved. What do I do now? She asked between sobs. How do I go home without him? One step at a time, Garrett said. It was all he knew. One day at a time. Eventually it gets easier. Not better, but easier. How do you know, Mom? Because I lost my son and my wife, and I'm still here, still standing. You don't have a choice about the pain, but you do have a choice about what you do with it. She pulled back, looked up at him. What did you do with yours? I helped people, tried to make sure other people didn't lose what I lost. Didn't always succeed, but I tried. Is that enough? Some days, other days, nothing's enough. But you keep going anyway, because that's what they'd want. Dalton would want you to keep going. Evelyn nodded slowly, wiped her eyes. He would. He always said I was stronger than I thought I was. He was right. The medical examiner's van pulled away, carrying Dalton Shepherd's body toward whatever came next. The sheriff's vehicles followed, leaving only Booker's truck in the empty overlook. The sun was fully up now. The desert morning was beautiful, the kind of clear, clean light that makes everything seem possible. I should take you home, Garrett said to Evelyn. Not yet. She looked at Cathedral Rock glowing red in the morning sun. I want to sit here a little longer. Just a little longer. Take all the time you need. So they sat, Evelyn in the chair where Dalton had died, Garrett, Booker, and Lorraine standing nearby, watching the sun climb higher, watching the shadows shift and change across the ancient stone. And in the silence of the desert morning, or with the wind whispering through the canyon, it almost seemed like they could hear Dalton's voice one last time, telling them it was okay, that he was at peace, that love doesn't end, it just changes form. 5:30 a.m. The sun climbed higher over the Sedona Desert, burning away the last shadows of night. Garrett stood beside Booker's truck, watching Evelyn sit alone at the overlook. She hadn't moved in over an hour, just sat there looking at Cathedral Rock, talking quietly to a husband who could no longer answer. Lorraine had stayed with her, keeping respectful distance, but close enough to help if needed. The nurse had called Evelyn's daughter, Sarah, who was driving down from Prescott, another hour before she arrived. Garrett's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, a text from an unknown number. Hospital filed formal charges. Warrant issued for your arrest. County prosecutor pushing for maximum penalty. I'm sorry, I tried. W. Whitmore. The doctor had done what he could, but the law was the law and Garrett had broken it. He showed the text to Booker. How long you think we got? Booker asked. Not long. Sheriff's probably got the warrant already. He's just being decent about it. Giving us time. We could run. Mexico's 8 hours south. You've got friends in Sonora. Garrett looked at the overlook at Evelyn's silhouette against the red rocks. No, I told Bridger I'd stay. I keep my word. Even if it means prison. Especially then. Booker pulled out his cigarettes, offered one to Garrett. They smoked in silence, watching the desert wake up. A roadrunner darted across the parking lot. In the distance, a coyote called. You remember what you said to me? Booker asked. Back in 2008, when I wanted to quit the club, Garrett remembered. Booker had been tired. Tired of the violence, the arrests, the constant battle with law enforcement. He'd wanted out. I told you that a man's character isn't measured by how many times he falls. It's measured by how many times he gets back up. You also said that honor matters more than freedom. That doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is what separates men from animals. I said that word for word. I wrote it down. Booker flicked ash from his cigarette. Guess now you get to prove if you meant it. At 6 a.m., Sheriff Bridger's SUV returned to the overlook. He parked next to the truck, got out slowly. His face was grave but not unkind. He walked over to where Garrett and Booker stood. Garrett Thorne, Bridger said formally. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of kidnapping, interference with medical treatment, and reckless endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. I know my rights, Sheriff. I expect you do. Bridger pulled out handcuffs. I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. Garrett did as instructed. The cuffs clicked and shut around his wrists, cold metal against skin. He'd been arrested before, knew the routine, but it had been years since he'd felt handcuffs. Strange how quickly the muscle memory came back. What about me? Booker asked. Warrant's only for Garrett. Hospital specifically named him. Far as I can tell, you were just giving a friend a ride. That's bullshit. I helped him take Dalton. Maybe, but I don't have a warrant for you, and I'm not looking to create extra paperwork. Bridger looked at him hard. Take the gift, son. Don't throw yourself in jail for pride. Booker looked at Garrett. The question was clear in his eyes. What do you want me to do? Take Evelyn home when her daughter gets here, Garrett said. Make sure she's okay. That's what I need you to do. Booker nodded reluctantly. All right, but I'm getting you a lawyer, a good one. Don't waste your money. It's my money to waste. Sheriff Bridger led Garrett to the SUV, helped him into the back seat with surprising gentleness. The door closed with a heavy thunk. The cage between front and back seat was steel mesh, worn smooth by years of transporting prisoners. Before Bridger started the engine, he turned around. For what it's worth, the sheriff said, I think you did the right thing. Dalton Shepherd died exactly where he wanted to die, exactly how he wanted to die. And his wife got to be there with him. That matters. Try telling that to the prosecutor. I will, but I don't know if it'll make a difference. The law doesn't always care about right and wrong, just legal and illegal. I know. The SUV pulled out of the overlook. Garrett watched through the window as Cathedral Rock grew smaller behind them. Watched Evelyn still sitting there, a tiny figure against the vast red landscape. He had kept his promise. He had gotten Dalton to the place he wanted to be. Had given him a choice about how to die. Whatever came next, that was enough. The Coconino County Detention Facility sat on the east side of Flagstaff, a low concrete building surrounded by razor wire and security cameras. Garrett had seen the outside many times over the years. First time seeing the inside. Processing took 2 hours. Fingerprints, mugshot, strip search, medical evaluation, property inventory. Every piece of his identity cataloged and stored. They took his wallet, his phone, his belt, his boots, gave him orange scrubs and plastic sandals. He was 67 years old, too old for this shit. They put him in a holding cell with 3 other men. One was passed out on the bench, reeking of alcohol. Another sat in the corner, young, maybe 25, nursing a black eye. The third was older 50s, staring at nothing. Garrett took the remaining corner, sat down on the concrete bench. The cell was small, 10 by 10, 1 toilet, 1 sink, 4 men. The walls were covered in scratched graffiti. Names, dates, crude drawings. What are you in for? When? The young one asked. Garrett didn't answer. I asked you a question, the old man, and I'm not answering it. The young one stood up, trying to look tough. You think you're better than me? Garrett looked at him. Really looked at him. The kid was scared, trying to cover it with aggression. Tale as old as time. Sit down, Garrett said quietly. Fuck you. I don't take orders from... Garrett stood. The movement was smooth, economical. No wasted motion. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, just stood there, and something in his eyes made the young one go quiet. I said, sit down. The kid sat. Garrett sat back down, closed his eyes, waited. At 9 a.m. a guard came to the cell. Thorne, you made bail. Garrett opened his eyes. What? Someone posted your bond, $25,000. You're free to go pending trial. He stood, followed the guard out. At the property desk, they returned his belongings. He dressed slowly, his body stiff from sitting on concrete. In the waiting area, he found Booker, and next to him a man Garrett didn't recognize. Late 60s, gray hair, expensive suit. He carried a leather briefcase and had the bearing of someone used to being listened to. Mr. Thorne, the man said, extending his hand. My name is Maxwell Pruitt. I'm an attorney. Your friend Mr. Kane has retained my services on your behalf. Garrett shook his hand, looked at Booker. I told you not to waste your money. And I told you it's my money, Booker said. Besides, I didn't pay him. Pruitt's doing this pro bono. Why buy him? Pruitt smiled slightly. Because 30 years ago, my daughter was in a car accident on Route 66. Her car went off the road, rolled 3 times. She was trapped inside unconscious, and the car was on fire. A man on a motorcycle stopped, pulled her out before the car exploded. Saved her life. He looked at Garrett directly. That man had a scar on his face. Ran from his eye to his jaw. My daughter never forgot him. And when she saw your arrest on the news this morning, she called me, asked me to help. Garrett remembered 1994. He'd been riding back from a run to Phoenix, saw the car go off the road, didn't even think about it, just stopped and pulled the girl out. Your daughter okay? She's a trauma surgeon now, saves lives every day. Says she does it because someone saved hers. Pruitt picked up his briefcase. Now let's return the favor. We have a preliminary hearing in 3 days. I need you to tell me everything that happened. The arrest made the news within hours. By that afternoon, it was everywhere. Biker arrested for kidnapping dying man from hospital. Hell's Angel faces charges in medical abduction case. Elderly man dies after being removed from life-saving care. The stories varied in their facts but agreed on the narrative. Garrett was a criminal, a thug, a dangerous man who had recklessly endangered a dying patient for his own selfish reasons. But then something unexpected happened. Evelyn Shepherd gave an interview. She sat in her living room surrounded by 51 years of memories and told the truth. About Dalton's wish to die at home. About the hospital's refusal. About Garrett's promise. About Cathedral Rock and the sunrise. And a man dying exactly where he wanted to be. He gave my husband a gift, Evelyn said, tears streaming down her face. The hospital would have kept Dalton alive for a few more hours, but they would have stolen his dignity, his choice, his right to die as himself. She looked directly at the camera. Garrett Thorne is not a criminal. He's a man of honor. And if loving my husband enough to give him that choice makes him a criminal, then I'm a criminal too. The interview went viral. Within 24 hours, a petition appeared online. Dismissed charges against Garrett Thorne. It gathered 10,000 signatures in the first day, 20,000 the second day. By the third day, it had 50,000 signatures. The comments section was filled with stories. My father died in a hospital. He begged to go home. They said no. I will regret not fighting for him for the rest of my life. This man is a hero. He gave someone dignity in death. We should all be so lucky. I'm a nurse. I've watched too many people die in hospitals against their will. The system is broken. This man tried to fix it. The local news picked it up, then the state news, then national. Veterans groups rallied. Biker clubs from across the Southwest announced they were riding to Flagstaff for the preliminary hearing. Right to Die advocates made Garrett their cause célèbre. The prosecutor's office released a statement. While we sympathize with Mr. Shepherd's family, we cannot condone vigilante actions that endanger lives and violate medical protocols. The law must be upheld. But the tide of public opinion was turning, and it was turning against them. On the second day, Dr. Sterling Whitmore gave his own interview. "I'm the doctor who was on duty that night," he said, "and I need to make something clear. Garrett Thorne did not kidnap Dalton Shepherd. He helped a dying man exercise his legal right to refuse treatment." He looked tired, older than his 61 years. "We have a crisis in this country. We keep people alive long past the point where life has any meaning for them. We hook them to machines and pump them full of drugs and tell ourselves we're helping. But sometimes, the most compassionate thing we can do is let go. Let people die with dignity, with choice, with love." Whitmore's voice cracked. "Garrett Thorne gave Dalton Shepherd something I couldn't give him as a doctor. He gave him freedom, and he did it knowing he might go to prison for it. That's not criminality, that's heroism." The medical board opened an investigation into Whitmore for his role in the incident. He faced possible license suspension, but he didn't recant, didn't back down. "If they want my license," he said, "they can have it. But I won't lie. I won't say that what happened was wrong, because it wasn't." 3 days after his arrest, Garrett walked into the Coconino County Courthouse for his preliminary hearing. He wore the only suit he owned, bought 20 years ago for Carson's funeral. It still fit more or less. Maxwell Pruitt walked beside him, briefcase in hand, calm and professional. Outside the courthouse, over 200 people had gathered. Bikers in leather, veterans in uniform, nurses in scrubs, ordinary people holding signs. "Free Garrett Thorne. Dignity in death is a human right. Heroes don't belong in prison." As Garrett climbed the courthouse steps, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire crowd was applauding. Garrett didn't acknowledge them, didn't wave or smile, just kept walking, eyes forward. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back. The bailiff had to turn people away. Evelyn Shepherd sat in the front row, flanked by her daughter Sarah and son Tom. When Garrett entered, she gave him a small nod, strength and gratitude in equal measure. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s. Rebecca Chen, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She had a reputation for being tough, uncompromising. Judge Nora Calloway presided, 68 years old, 30 years on the bench, white hair pulled back in a severe bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. No-nonsense demeanor. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood. Judge Calloway took her seat, surveyed the courtroom. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the state of Arizona versus Garrett James Thorne. Mr. Thorne is charged with kidnapping, interference with medical treatment, and reckless endangerment." She looked at Garrett. "How does the defendant plead?" Pruitt stood. "Your Honor, before we enter a plea, I'd like to make a motion to dismiss all charges on the grounds that my client was acting under the explicit direction of the alleged victim, who was exercising his legal right to refuse medical treatment." "Your Honor," Chen stood immediately. "The victim was not competent to make that decision. He was dying, under extreme duress. His judgment was compromised." "That's absurd," Pruitt countered. "Dalton Shepherd was conscious, lucid, and had full decision-making capacity until the moment of his death. Are we now saying that dying patients lose their civil rights?" Judge Calloway held up her hand. "I'll hear arguments. Ms. Chen, call your first witness." Chen called the hospital administrator, a man in his 50s, nervous, reading from prepared notes. He testified about protocols, about liability, about how removing a patient against medical advice endangered lives and exposed the hospital to lawsuits. Pruitt cross-examined. "Did Dalton Shepherd have the legal right to refuse treatment?" "Technically, yes, but yes or no?" "Yes." "Did Dalton Shepherd explicitly ask to leave the hospital?" "He did, but the medical staff determined." "Did he ask yes or no?" The administrator's jaw tightened. "Yes." No further questions. Chen called a nurse who had been on duty that night. She testified that Garrett had accessed restricted areas, that he'd moved a critically ill patient without authorization, that he'd endangered Dalton's life. But under cross-examination, she admitted that Dalton had been lucid, that he had explicitly asked to leave, that the hospital's refusal was based on liability concerns, not medical necessity. Then Pruitt called his witnesses. First was Lorraine Fletcher, the nurse who had accompanied them. She testified about Dalton's condition, about his clear mental state, about his repeated requests to die at home. In your professional opinion, Pruitt asked, was Dalton Shepherd mentally competent to make his own medical decisions? Absolutely. He was dying, but his mind was sharp. He knew exactly what he wanted. And in your experience as a hospice nurse, is it unusual for dying patients to want to be at home? It's the most common request I hear. Everyone wants to die at home, but our medical system makes it almost impossible. Next was Dr. Whitmore. He testified about the conversation with Garrett, about his own decision to help, about the ethics of patient autonomy. Your Honor, Whitmore said, looking directly at the judge, I've been a doctor for 35 years. I've saved hundreds of lives. I'm proud of that work. But I've also watched people suffer needlessly because our system prioritizes liability over humanity. Dalton Shepherd deserved better, and Garrett Thorne gave it to him. Chen tried to discredit him, suggested he'd violated his oath, endangered a patient, acted unethically. Whitmore didn't flinch. I acted according to my conscience, and if that cost me my license, so be it. Some things matter more than careers. Finally, Pruitt called Evelyn Shepherd. She walked to the stand slowly, a small woman carrying enormous grief. She was sworn in, sat down, folded her hands in her lap. Mrs. Shepherd, Pruitt said gently, can you tell the court what your husband wanted? He wanted to die at home, in our bed. That's what he'd promised my predecessor, his first wife, Ruth. That's what he wanted for himself. And did the hospital respect that wish? No, they said it was too dangerous, too much liability. They said he had to stay. What did you do? I begged them, pleaded, but they wouldn't listen. So I went to find Garrett, because Dalton had told me that if I ever needed help, real help, I should find the man with the scar. And did Garrett Thorne help you? He saved my husband. Evelyn's voice broke. Not his life, his death. He saved Dalton's death from being stolen by machines and protocols and fear of lawsuits. He gave my husband back his dignity. She looked at Garrett. My husband died watching the sunrise at Cathedral Rock, the place where we fell in love. I was holding his hand. He was at peace. And it's because of Garrett Thorne. Tears streamed down her face. If that's a crime, then I don't understand the law anymore. Because it felt like grace. The courtroom was silent. Chen didn't cross-examine. What could she say? Judge Calloway removed her glasses, rubbed her eyes. She looked tired, old, human. I'm going to take a 30-minute recess, she said. When I return, I'll issue my ruling. 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Garrett sat in a side room with Pruitt drinking bad coffee from a paper cup. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? It was out of their hands now, in the hands of a judge who had seen everything and believed in nothing except the law. When the bailiff came to get them, Garrett's hands were steady. Whatever happened, he had done what needed doing. That was enough. The courtroom had somehow gotten even more crowded. People pressed against the walls. The tension was electric. Judge Calloway entered. Everyone rose. She sat. They sat. She looked out over the courtroom. Her face revealed nothing. I've been a judge for 30 years, she began. In that time, I've presided over thousands of cases. Murder trials, robbery, assault, rape, fraud. I've seen the worst of humanity parade through this courtroom. She paused. I've also seen the best. People who risked everything to do what they believed was right. People who stood up when it would have been easier to sit down. People who chose conscience over convenience. Her eyes found Garrett. This case troubles me. On one hand, the law is clear. Garrett Thorne removed a patient from medical care without authorization. He violated hospital protocols. He endangered a life. Chen leaned forward, sensing victory. But on the other hand, Judge Calloway continued, Dalton Shepherd had the legal right to refuse treatment. He was competent. He was clear about his wishes. And those wishes were denied by an institution more concerned with liability than with humanity. She put her glasses back on. The question before this court is not whether Garrett Thorne broke hospital rules. He clearly did. The question is whether he violated the law. She picked up a document, read from it. Arizona Revised Statute 36-3201 establishes that competent adults have the right to refuse medical treatment, including life-sustaining treatment. This right is fundamental. It supersedes hospital policy. It supersedes medical opinion. It is in essence the right to determine the course of one's own death. She looked up. Dalton Shepherd exercised that right. He refused further treatment. He demanded to leave. The hospital denied his request. In doing so, they violated his civil rights. Chen stood. Your Honor, the hospital was acting in the patient's best interests. The hospital was acting in the hospital's best interests, Judge Calloway interrupted. Fear of liability is not a legal justification for denying someone their civil rights. She turned back to Garrett. Did Mr. Thorne's actions violate hospital policy? Yes. Were they reckless? Perhaps. But did they violate Arizona law? I find that they did not. He assisted a competent adult in exercising his legal rights. That is not kidnapping. That is not interference with medical treatment. That is advocacy. She picked up her gavel. Therefore, I am dismissing all charges against Garrett Thorne. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted. Applause, cheers, people hugging each other. Evelyn Shepherd sobbed, her children holding her. Chen gathered her papers, her face a mask of professional composure. But Garrett could see the anger underneath. Judge Calloway banged her gavel again. Order, I'm not finished. The room quieted. Mr. Thorne approached the bench. Garrett stood, walked forward. Pruitt came with him. Judge Calloway looked down at him. I'm dismissing the charges because I believe the law is on your side. But I need you to understand something. What you did was dangerous. Dalton Shepherd could have died in that truck. He could have suffered unnecessarily. You got lucky. I know, Your Honor. Did you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a 67-year-old man who just took on the entire medical establishment. That's either brave or stupid. I haven't decided which. Maybe it's both. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Maybe it is. She leaned forward. My husband died 3 years ago. Cancer, stage 4. He wanted to die at home. The doctor said it was too dangerous, too much pain. They kept him in the hospital for his last 2 weeks. Drugged him so heavily he didn't even know I was there. Her voice cracked slightly. I've regretted that every day since. Regretted not fighting harder, not demanding what he wanted, not being brave enough to break the rules. She looked at Garrett with something like respect. You were brave enough. You gave Evelyn Shepherd something I couldn't give my husband. You gave her the gift of being present for his death, of honoring his wishes, of letting him go with dignity. She straightened. The charges are dismissed. You're free to go, Mr. Thorne, and may God forgive me if I'm wrong about this. The gavel came down again. Final. Garrett nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. He turned to leave. Evelyn rushed forward, threw her arms around him. He stood there, awkward, while she cried against his chest. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving him back to me, even if it was just for those last few hours. It's what he wanted. I know, but it took courage to make it happen. Real courage. She pulled back, looked up at him. What will you do now? Garrett thought about it. He was 67 years old, too old to go back to the club, too old for the violence and chaos of that life. His son was dead. His wife was dead. He had no family left. But maybe that wasn't quite true. I think, he said slowly, I'm going to help people. People like Dalton. People who want to die with dignity but don't know how. People who need someone willing to fight for them. Evelyn smiled through her tears. He would have liked that. Dalton always said you were the kind of man who found purpose in other people's pain. Maybe I am. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had swelled to over 300. When Garrett emerged, they erupted in cheers. Bikers revved their engines. People waved signs. Cameras flashed. Garrett didn't wave, didn't smile, just walked down the steps through the crowd to where Booker waited with his truck. You're a free man, Booker said. For now. What's that mean? It means I just made a lot of powerful enemies. The hospital, the medical establishment, they won't forget this. So what you won? This time, next time might be different. Booker started the trunk. Then we'll deal with next time when it comes. Right now you're free. That's worth celebrating. They drove through Flagstaff, past the courthouse, past the hospital where it had all begun. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and gold. Garrett's phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. I heard what happened, what you did for that man. My mother is dying. The hospital won't let her come home. Can you help, please? He stared at the text for a long moment. Then another text came, and another. People asking for help, begging for someone to fight for their dying loved ones the way he'd fought for Dalton. Looks like you've got a new job, Booker said. Looks like. You going to do it? Garrett thought about Dalton, about Cathedral Rock, about a man dying exactly where he wanted to die, exactly how he wanted to die, about the gift of choice, the grace of dignity, the courage it takes to stand up against systems that steal both. Yeah, he said quietly, I'm going to do it. The Veterans Hospice Care Center sat on the outskirts of Cottonwood, a low building surrounded by desert landscape. Garrett pulled his Harley into the parking lot, killed the engine. He came here every Tuesday and Thursday now, part of his community service, part of his penance, part of his purpose. Inside the hospice was quiet, soft lighting, comfortable furniture. No beeping machines, no frantic staff, just peace and acceptance, and the recognition that death, when it comes with dignity, is not the enemy. He found Walter Gunny McCready in the common room, sitting in a wheelchair staring out the window at the desert. 82 years old, Marine Corps veteran, Korea and Vietnam. No family, no home, just a body that was shutting down and a mind that was still sharp as a blade. Gunny, Garrett said. The old Marine turned, his eyes lit up. Gravedigger, didn't think I'd see you today. Told you I'd come. I keep my word. So you do. Gunny gestured to the chair beside him. Sit. Tell me about the world outside. Garrett sat. They talked. About nothing and everything. About the Marines. About old wars and old wounds. About what it meant to be a man when your body was failing, but your mind refused to quit. I'm dying, Gunny said eventually. Doctors give me 2 weeks, maybe less. I know. I want to die at home, but I don't have a home. I know that too. Gunny looked at him. Can you help me like you helped that other man, Shepherd? Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Yeah, I can help you. What are you going to do? I'm going to give you a home, right here, in this hospice. And when it's time, we're going to take you outside. Put you under the stars, let you die the way Marines die. On your feet facing the enemy, with your brothers beside you. Gunny's eyes filled with tears. You'd do that. I would. I will. Why would? Because you earned it, oh. Because you served your country and you deserve better than dying alone in a sterile room. Because it's the right thing to do. Gunny reached out, gripped Garrett's hand with surprising strength. Thank you, brother. Don't thank me yet. We've got 2 weeks. Let's make them count. 2 weeks later, on a clear desert night, Garrett and Booker carried Gunny outside. They'd set up a cot in the hospice garden under the stars, surrounded by flowering cacti and the smell of sage. Other veterans came, men who'd served with Gunny, men who'd never met him but understood what he'd given. They formed a circle around the cot, standing watch, keeping vigil. Gunny looked up at the stars, the same stars he'd navigated by in Korea, the same stars he'd slept under in the jungles of Vietnam. It's a good night to die, he whispered. Every night's a good night when you die free, Garrett said. Gunny smiled, and as the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Walter McCready took his last breath, surrounded by brothers, under the open sky, free. 6 months after Dalton's death, Garrett stood at the graveside, Cottonwood Cemetery, a simple headstone. Dalton and Ruth Shepherd together again. Evelyn stood beside him. She came here every week, brought flowers, sat and talked to her husband and her predecessor like they could still hear her. Maybe they could. Thank you for coming, she said. I promised Dalton I'd check on you. I'm okay. Some days are harder than others, but I'm okay. She looked at the headstone. I've been thinking about what you said, about finding purpose in helping others. I want to do that too. How? I want to help families like mine, families whose loved ones want to die at home but don't know how to make it happen. I want to be an advocate, a voice, someone who fights the system. Garrett looked at her with respect. That's good. That's right. Will you help me? However I can. They stood together in silence. Then Evelyn pulled something from her purse, an envelope. Dalton left this for you, in his will. I was supposed to give it to you when the time was right. I think now is the time. Garrett took the envelope. Inside was a key and a note in Dalton's shaky handwriting. Garrett, my 1965 Harley-Davidson Panhead is yours. It's in the garage. I rebuilt it 30 years ago, but never had the courage to ride it the way it deserves. You will. Ride it for me. Ride it for everyone who never got the chance to choose their own road. And when you ride, remember freedom isn't just about where you're going. It's about choosing to go at all. Your brother Dalton. Garrett's throat tightened. He folded the note carefully, put it in his pocket. There's something else, Evelyn said. She pulled out a newspaper clipping. Did you see this? It was an article from the New England Journal of Medicine. The Shepherd case reconsidering patient autonomy in end-of-life care. The article detailed Dalton's case, discussed the ethics of patient choice, argued for reform in how hospitals handled end-of-life decisions. It had been written by a team of doctors and bioethicists, and it was changing the conversation. Because of Dalton, because of what Garrett had done. You started something, Evelyn said. A movement. People are fighting back, demanding the right to die with dignity. Hospitals are changing policies. The system is listening. Good. It's because of you. It's because of Dalton. I just kept a promise. Evelyn smiled. You're a good man, Garrett Thorne. Better than you think you are. He didn't answer. Didn't know how to. They left the cemetery together. Evelyn drove away in her car. Garrett walked to where he'd parked his Harley. But today there were two motorcycles. His Road King and Dalton's Panhead. Booker had ridden it there, left it for him. The Panhead was beautiful. Black and chrome restored to perfection. A piece of history. A piece of Dalton. Garrett straddled the bike, felt its weight beneath him. Put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, caught, roared to life. The sound echoed across the cemetery. A sound of freedom, of choice, of roads not yet traveled. He sat there for a moment, hands on the handlebars, feeling the engine vibrate through his body. Then he heard a voice. Not real, just memory. Dalton's voice from that night at Cathedral Rock. Love doesn't end, it just changes form. Garrett smiled, put the bike in gear. And as the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of fire, Garrett, Gravedigger, Thorne rode into the gathering dark. Not running from anything, not chasing anything, just riding, free.